All right, so I think that Bill Burr is honestly becoming one of my favorite comedians, and not just because of this clip that we're about to get into here, where he basically is bashing capitalism and somewhat defending socialism in a kind of tangential way. But also, I like Bill Burr because I think that he's one of the few large, big name comedians who has not really recently spiraled down this sort of like reactionary, conservative route where a lot of them are like focused on, bashing trans people as if like that's the biggest threat to society and shit like that. So I think that he has some really base takes here, and so I just wanted to watch through a couple of these different clips that were posted by Squirrel. So let's go ahead and jump into this first one here, and I will sort of commentate my way through it and give you my thoughts on this.
Socialism. Hi, Bill, you redheaded fuck. I really appreciate the bluntness of that. How are you? Last week you mentioned you don't know why people demonize socialism. I was really taken aback at that statement. Oh, Jesus Christ. Every country that has tried socialism has failed, and it's responsible for tens of millions of deaths. All right, so would you say capitalism is working? And it is not, when like, what is it, like 99% of the wealth is in like fucking 2% of the people's hands? All of these tent cities, you're telling me this is working? You don't think capitalism is responsible for tens of millions of deaths? Anyway, Russia, Germany, China, Cuba, and most recently Venezuela have tried or right now are socialist countries. As far as I know, whatever Cuba was trying to do, we prevented them from doing with a fucking embargo or whatever the hell we did. We've been fucking with them for 60 years. So I think you're looking at like what a lot of people do is you look at your own country through rose-colored glasses the same way you look at your own sports team like, oh, my team doesn't cheat, but your team does.
Okay, so that's just the first clip there. I mean, we're going to get into this second one, but already, I think he was making so many good points that is, he's doing it in a way that would definitely appeal to his sort of an audience or just like normie people or even maybe some conservatives who have this same type of warped view about socialism and how capitalism is this perfect system and socialism is just this demonic force within the world that constantly fails and just results in mass death events and genocide and all of these horrible things, right? But he gives a good pushback there because, number one, the idea that like socialism inherently is responsible for tens of millions of deaths around the world. No. You could make some arguments that, there have been self-identified socialist leaders who have had certainly authoritarian tendencies. Some of them have committed mass murders, but that's also true of capitalist leaders as well, right? Talk about all of the dozens and dozens of dictators, far-right fascist dictators that the United States empire has propped up in countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia that have killed millions and millions of people. That is not something that is necessarily unique to the economic philosophy. It's something that is unique to being a brutal authoritarian, whether you want to be a capitalist, a fascist, a communist, a socialist, however you want to self-identify, the labels there are not really the problem. The economics there are not necessarily the problem when it comes to, a socialist model of thought. So, just on that front, you want to talk about counting the bodies. Well, as he was pointing out there, how about the wars that we have waged overseas to extract natural resources from countries like Iraq? The Iraq War, certainly you could make good arguments that it was mostly about natural resources, specifically oil. Talk about like the wars that we have launched in Vietnam and in Latin America as well, to prevent a lot of these countries from falling into the grips of communism. How many millions and millions of people have we killed as a result of these wars? It's like incalculable, and that doesn't even get into the sort of more abstract arguments in terms of what he was talking about with, homelessness and the fact that we have millions of people who die every year from starvation while we live on a planet that has abundant enough food to feed the entirety of the global population multiple times over. Or the fact that, again, homeless people are sleeping and dying out on the streets while there are, thousands and thousands of homes in this country that are sitting empty because we basically treat them as commodities instead of treating this as a human right, as socialists would want us to do. So, there's just so many different things where if you want to get into the actual debate in terms of which system or which label that leaders have identified with throughout the history of the world, which one has produced more death. You could certainly make an argument that capitalism is responsible for far more death, and you could also make an extension to that with tying capitalism and the history of how that branched out of slavery and colonialism and ongoing imperialism. All of those have the same exact through line, and if you want to start counting the bodies, then I don't think that it's going to work out in favor of anybody who wants to praise the capitalist system like it's this amazing and perfect thing, and that socialism is inherently this evil, corrupting thing. It's just kind of a stupid at face value argument to be making. And, if you want to talk about just the fundamentals of what these systems are and, which one is going to disproportionately lead to authoritarian tendencies, well, socialism in theory, right? Communism in theory is one that promotes essentially worker democracy. It promotes economic democracy, right? So lots of people say that they want a political democracy, right? Everybody, comes out and says they're in favor of political democracy, but then when it comes to economic democracy, you have a completely different visions here. And that's why you end up getting such a violent response from a lot of imperial powers or capitalist powers to even a whiff of socialism growing in various countries around the world. It's because capitalism is an inherently authoritarian economic model, whereas socialism is, in theory, again, obviously there's been some authoritarian socialist or self-identified socialist leaders throughout history, but in theory, socialism is supposed to be a system that gives people more of a democratic say within not only their political system and who they elect as their representatives, but also within their workplace or within the broader social economy, right? So those are two different systems where if you want to talk about authoritarian tendencies, well, you can go and look at capitalism because inherently as an economic philosophy, it has authoritarian tendencies that are baked within it. And obviously then you also get authoritarian leaders in a lot of fascist countries and capitalist countries around the world who are responsible for immense suffering and death that is almost incalculable. But let's go ahead and get into this second clip here where he continues.
You're really sort of looking the other way with what capitalism has done to other countries. All the sweatshop labor, all the wars we've fought in over air quote freedom, where most of it is about, natural resources, all of these fucking countries where we've gone in and, stuck in heads of the government that are going to do what we want to do so we can fucking take advantage of them. To sit there and look at capitalism like it's, I don't know, dude. All right, I took off my Birkenstocks. I'm going to read the rest of this here. Okay, socialism all starts the same way. Create a boogeyman like corporations, the rich, or a race. Oh, yeah, we've never done that in this country. We've never created a boogeyman. There's never, Jesus Christ, buddy. Blame them for all your problems. Yeah, we never did that. The leaders then promised to fix all the problems.
I think that it's also kind of funny and like an important distinction to be made there where, socialists and leftists and certainly like even myself, we do have a tendency to demonize, corporations, gigantic big pharmaceutical companies and places like Amazon and billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I personally think that they absolutely deserve those criticisms, but in the broader like systemic critique, that's also important to be making that. But again, if you want to make a comparison here between how capitalist countries versus like socialist movements have been demonizing groups, well, it's been significantly more the fascists and significantly more the right-wing capitalists who have used race and ethnicity and immigration and sexual orientation and all of these other signifiers in order to demonize and scapegoat people within society. It's an entirely different categorical thing to demonize a class of people, an economic class of people, because they are expropriating wealth from the country or from the broader population, than to, compare that to scapegoating a race of people or something that is an inherent characteristic about who people are, right? One of those, you can make an argument and say, okay, yes, these corporations within the United States, they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, while average Americans are sleeping out on the streets, barely making it by paycheck to paycheck. 70% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck right now. People can barely get by, and you have all of this wealth that is being hoarded into the hands of a few people. That's a completely fair critique. But if you're a pro-capitalist, right-wing reactionary or a fascist, and you turn around and you say, no, the problems with our society are not systemic. They have nothing to do with the, hierarchical nature of how we have set up our economy and our political systems and our society. It has only to do with, this specific group of people, whether it's like Jews in Nazi Germany, or whether it's, these ongoing attacks against gay and trans people here in the United States, or historically demonizing black people here in the United States, right? Those are sort of two different analyses there. And so it's kind of amazing that he would not only bring those up in the same sentence, but also that the person who was writing Bill Burr here would conflate all of those as if they are inherently attributable to socialist countries, as if like capitalist countries have never used, or fascist countries have never used scapegoated minorities. It's just completely ridiculous.
Oh boy. Slowly the government starts to control every aspect of your life. Why does this sound so familiar? promise that aren't they like recording all our phone conversations now? And we're slowly on our way to getting microchipped. Promise that everybody will have the same equity and outcome. This creates mediocrity, loss of the middle class. Loss of the middle class. Where have I seen that before? Of innovation. Corporations are buying houses now. They're just buying them up so they can fucking Airbnb. Like, literally the American dream, buying a house. They're going to take that away in this country. That reduces the tax money coming out into the government. Buddy, I can't fucking read all of this horse shit. This is everything that we're doing too. Capitalism. Okay, I'll get to the end here. Capitalism. Now, you know what? Let's just read all of this because it's fucking hilarious that he's acting like none of this is happening in this country. And you know what's funny about people? You don't like it, get the fuck out of here. This is my favorite thing ever. Yet you can look at your sports team and be like, what the fuck is this coach doing? And then nobody goes like, you don't go fucking root for somebody else. No, I'm criticizing it because I love it and I want it to win.
All right, especially I love that last point that he was just making there because it's true. Because and this is something that only goes one way, because you will have conservatives like, Donald Trump in 2016 running on Make America Great Again and going out and giving these speeches where he's saying America is being turned into a third world country where, everything is collapsing and falling apart and we need to return to this greatness. Well, baked within that is this concept that in his view of the world, or even with conservatives' view of the world, that something is not right about this country, right? People are getting fucked over. Something needs to change at a macro level. But when conservatives pose that, it's them wanting to make the country better. It's them wanting to save the country from the evil radical communist threat or the evil, Democrats or whatever. But then when a leftist or a socialist makes the same critique systemically about the United States, then conservatives turn around and they say, well, you fucking hate the country. Well, if you like, socialism so much, why don't you go move to Venezuela or whatever? I mean, it's just like completely one-sided and ridiculous. And it's such a stupid argument at face value. It's perfectly, exemplified in the analogy that he was just giving there. It is like just having a sports team, right? I'm a fan of the Atlanta Falcons. We fucking suck right now. We are a trash team. But, me coming out and saying like, we have a bad quarterback. We should, let this rookie start, or our coach on offense is not doing too well. We should maybe think about replacing him. You don't have people within the fan base turning around and saying, well, why don't you go root for like the Green Bay Packers or some shit? That's not how it works. You root for things. You want things to get better. You point out critiques so that they can improve over time, and you put forward ideas, and then you try those ideas in order to, work your way towards whatever system you think is going to be preferable in the future. It doesn't mean you hate the country. It means you care about the country because you want to actually see it change in the long run. But we're going to go ahead and finish off here with this last clip. It's about 2 minutes long.
Punish the rich, which eventually leads to them leaving the country. Oh, yeah, that hasn't happened. Yeah, the rich haven't, their money leaves the country and then comes back in the form of an interest-free loan that is then forgiven. Jesus, buddy, come on. The richest people usually employ the most of the population. Oh, boy. Disarm the citizens so that they cannot revolt. Control the media, like promoting the government. Control the media. There's two guys that own the media, Ted Turner and fucking that other guy there.
Also, just a point on the guns, okay? Karl Marx and many socialist leaders throughout history have been aggressively pro-gun, okay? They have not been like, everybody needs to surrender your weapons to the government, okay? They were, always talking about how the proletariat needs to be armed and ready to fight in defense of themselves.
The guy from Fox News. That's why we're Hatfields and McCoys right now. Disarm the citizens so they cannot revolt. Control the media, like promoting the government agenda with propaganda, then censorship of all their other ideas. Yeah, creating areas where you can only protest, which are down and around the corner, away from the fucking media. Yeah, okay. Eventually, all rights are taken away. Dissenters, journalists, and politicians, oppositions are jailed or executed. Eventually, the leaders will become exactly what they originally campaigned against. Jesus Christ, buddy. I've forgotten what your... He goes, there's much more to it on an economic level, but as a fellow moron, it's too complicated for me to understand. All right. I am also a fellow moron, but dude, all of that shit has happened. If you look at all the rights and everything that you have lost in the last fucking 20 years, I don't even begin in creating a boogeyman and racism, genocide, all of that shit. We've done all of that. When I was a kid, there was rules on media ownership. No one person could own any 7. It was rules of 7. No one person can own 7 radio stations, newspapers, TV stations, blah, 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 in one market, because they knew if you owned all of that, if you control the media, you control thought. And yet they've let Ted Turner and that fucking, I want to say Ralph Nader, Rupert Murdoch, do exactly that. And present, CNN and Fox News have the fucking balls to present the people that are on TV as journalists and then also acting as though you're watching news. You're not. You're watching propaganda.
All right, so, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and leave it off there. I mean, I think he made a lot of good points there. I think that, again, it's nice to have one of these, like, big-name comedians who isn't just spending all day, like, bashing trans people or something and is actually, like, you know, pushing back against a lot of these lazy, right-wing, reactionary talking points. So, you know, I would be curious to see him sit down and have a conversation with, like, one of the, you know, major leftists within independent media and, like, sort of hash out what his actual political ideology is. I mean, just based on that, I would think he would probably be somebody who would probably be like mostly in line with like Bernie Sanders or something like that. I don't think that he is a socialist or a communist or anything like that. But I mean, clearly he understands a lot of these things, right? He understands a lot of the talking points. And I mean, back to back, he was making retorts that, like, you know, are retorts that I would be trying to make if I was having a conversation with somebody who was bringing up a lot of those same talking points in, you know, bashing socialism and attacking capitalism. But I mean, at the end of the day, right, you know, if you want to talk about these systems, if you want to talk about these economic philosophies or, you know, approaches to how we should organize society, to me, it's really simple, okay? I don't usually like talking about, like, this X country throughout history and the atrocities that they have committed or didn't commit and comparing that to other countries and trying to get into the weeds of all of that. I think just at a basic fundamental level, the reason why I identify as a socialist and why I despise the capitalist system as a mode of production is because capitalism is, by its very nature, inherently authoritarian, okay? You cannot have a sustainable a political democracy, and we are seeing this as, you know, our democracy or so-called democracy here in the United States continues to decay. We've seen the studies come out since like 2014, that famous Princeton study where essentially there's a one-to-one correlation between what the oligarch class, what big corporations want, and what gets passed in legislation. There's almost no correlation whatsoever between what the bottom 80% of the country wants and what gets passed in legislation. So I don't even know if you could really in good faith call the United States a democracy right now. But at least we sort of still have this, you know, thin veil of political democracy. But we certainly do not have economic democracy. And that's my main point, is that, you know, capitalism by its nature is inherently authoritarian. And part of that process and part of this ongoing, you know, monopolization of all of these various industries as a select few of people garner more and more power under their belt, and they start to wield that in the political systems as well, then you just have this complete decay where, you know, nothing is able to get done, nothing that meaningfully improves people's lives is able to get through Congress in the case of the United States, or really any country around the world that has fallen prey to the same types of things. But I mean, we're not able to get anything done that materially improves people's lives. That has reverberating effects down the line where people don't have that sense of stability or faith in any of our systems or institutions in the long run. And that leaves them a hell of a lot more susceptible to fall for a lot of the fascist and fake right-wing populist talking points that we hear out of people like Donald Trump or, you know, Jair Bolsonaro or any of these other far-right leaders that we've been covering over the last couple of months and years. And I mean, that's how you end up with a completely destabilized society that descends into fascism. And so, you know, that's why many leftists say that, you know, fascism and capitalism are intertwined like this. Now, again, that's not to excuse some of the authoritarian tendencies of some self-identified socialist countries around the world or throughout history. That's completely fine. I don't care about that, because if you're giving a critique of imperialism or you're giving a critique of authoritarian policies, then that's completely separate to me than the actual economic system or the philosophy behind socialism and communism, which is, again, at its very core, expanding democracy, not just from the political system, but also to the economic realm, and empowering people who are on the lowest rung of the ladder under our hierarchical capitalist system, and empowering them to have more autonomy over their day-to-day lives, to have, you know, more of a return in terms of what their labor is providing for the labor that they are putting in on a day-to-day basis, and just having some semblance of stability and being able to have healthcare and housing and have their basic necessities met, and socializing a lot of those things so that they aren't treated as commodities. You don't have people sleeping out on the streets. You don't have tens of thousands of people in the United States dying because they can't afford healthcare. You know, you don't have a lot of those negative effects that are associated with these commodified industries that we have here in the U.S. that should be socialized. They should be either nationalized or treated as a public utility or socialized so that, you know, they're considered a fundamental human right, which is exactly what they are. And so, that would be my message, is that, credit to Bill Burr for coming out here and pushing back against a lot of these talking points. But in terms of, making these appeals to other people and trying to convince people of left-wing economic policy approaches, just keep it really simple, right? I mean, that's something that the type of rhetoric that he was using there is going to be significantly more effective than trying to get into an argument about the characteristics of the USSR or, the characteristics of North Korea or even Venezuela or Cuba, right? Get down to the fundamentals, talk about what it is at a core level, and, discuss how a lot of these talking points that you hear about socialism and how scary and terrible it is, they're already happening right the fuck now under our current capitalist system.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying